بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا المرسلين. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Sumaya Wahid with CAIR Washington. I'm a board member and I'm your host this evening. I began with the name of Allah, the loving, the love-giving Lord, and with prayers on the beloved Prophet Muhammad, and with the prayer, Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. That's a prayer for expansion and eloquence. I'm really excited to be the host tonight. This is CAIR Washington's annual Gala Part 1. It's virtual, as you can see. We wanted to be in person, but we wanted to play it safe. So thank you for joining us. While there's been a pandemic raging, the work has not stopped. In fact, in many ways, it's gone harder than ever. And so we wanted to give you an update on what we've been up to this past year. We wanted to share some highlights, honor some of our incredible community partners, and hear from our keynote speaker, Imam Khalid Latif. So before we start off, wanted to kick it off with some blessings. Our very own Ayub Ahmed is going to give us a Quranic recitation. Ayub is the operations assistant for CAIR Washington and currently a first year at Seattle University School of Law. After Ayub, you'll hear from CAIR Washington's executive director, Imran Siddiqui. But first, please, Ayub.
Jazakallah khair, sister. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ar-Rahman. علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بالحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يخرج منهما لؤلؤ والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله العظيم. And now I'll be reading the translation of Surah Rahman. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, the most compassionate, taught the Quran, created humanity, and taught them speech. The sun and the moon travel with precision. The stars and the trees bow down in submission. As for the sky, he raised it high and set the balance of justice, so that you do not defraud the scale. Weigh with justice and do not give short measure. He laid out the earth for all beings. In it are fruit, palm trees with great stars, and grain with precious and aromatic plants. Then which of your Lord's favorites are eating and drinking both of the land? He created
Okay, Ayub, it sounds like your sound kind of went.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Between them are barriers, so neither of them may transgress. Then which of your Lord's favors will you deny? Out of both waters come forth pearls and coral. Then which of your Lord's favors will you deny? Sadaqallahu al-Azim.
Thank you so much for that, Ayub. Next, we're going to hear from Imran Siddiqui, CAIR Washington's executive director.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Ayub. Jazakallah khair. That was beautiful. I think it cut out a little bit, but we were able to get us one of my favorite surahs in the Quran, Surah Rahman, and that's something that's always prescient in my mind. It always has lessons, during difficult times and good times. Whenever you're seeing beauty out there, that those ayahs always come to mind. Which of these favors of your Lord do you deny? So Jazakallah khair for that. Thank you everyone for attending. We have a great event planned for today. It's that time of the year. Usually at the end of the year, we're all getting together and planning some type of gala event. I know it's been a great tradition here in Washington State for many years, where the CAIR Washington and the community get together. You're able to dress up, and it's like almost like the Muslim Oscars. So during the COVID pandemic, obviously it has put a little bit of a damper on that, because we haven't been able to get together in person as much. But alhamdulillah, we've been able to, last year we put together a virtual event, which was really, great. And this year we've had to do the same. But no, it's still one of the most important times for us from a CAIR Washington perspective, to get together and talk about some of the great work that we're doing as an organization. And it's also one of those key times of the year where we're trying to raise money for the amazing work that we've been doing. So with that being said, there's two amazing events that are taking place this today with Imam Khalid Latif, and next weekend with the amazing Dr. Cornell West. So we're really excited about those events, and we couldn't do this without our great sponsors. We have a great group of sponsors that have stepped up this year, and I wanted to play one of those videos real quick from our partners at the ACLU, who've been doing some great work alongside us in the Tech Equity Coalition. Our Deputy Executive Director, Amanda, joined us from ACLU of Arizona. So we have a great relationship with ACLU, and let's go ahead and play that video. All right. Looks like we had a little bit of sound issue with that, but usually just imagine motivating music in the background, some type of motivating music happening, but you can see the amazing work that they do. It doesn't really matter. So Jazakallah khair, everybody, for attending once again. I had a whole idea of what I wanted to talk about today. I was going to focus on a lot of positive things that are going on in terms of the organization and our community. And I'll still be doing that, but I think the past few days has been a really stark reminder of the challenges that our Washington State Muslim community have faced, in these past few years. Yesterday, I spent the day driving to and from Olympia to support their community after an explosive device was dropped in front of their masjid on the 23rd of November. Alhamdulillah, nobody was hurt and no damage was done to the facility, but straight from the community members who live in the surrounding areas around the masjid, like there's a whole neighborhood of community members that live in the surrounding subdivision there. It was a very loud and jarring experience for them, especially those who escaped bombings and oppression in their homelands. And so this was a lot of trauma that was brought up in that attack. So this was the third such attack on a masjid in Washington State in the past month and a half. You have the Tacoma masjid that was hit with a Molotov cocktail and did extensive damage to the facility just a month and a half ago. And then you had a burglary inside of the Mount Lake Terrace masjid with people coming into the facility, taking the Qurans off of the shelf and throwing them into a dumpster. And the problem is that most people didn't even know that these things were happening. So I joined the local masjid leaders there in Olympia and interfaith partners the past few days, trying to strategize what is the best way of addressing this situation. And the love and responsiveness that the local community showed in turning out yesterday at Jummah prayers in support of the masjid was nothing short of amazing. But the question came up, what do we do? How do we draw attention to this? Very few people are even like hearing about these attacks. It's people are caught up in the news cycle, whatever the corporate media is sort of feeding to you. And a lot of times these things, just fly under the radar. So how do we raise awareness about the situation? How do we move the meter? CAIR Washington, with our 2 decades of experience, are here to move that meter. We're seeing concerning levels of Islamophobia on a national level, with members of Congress espousing hate and directing violent rhetoric at their very own Muslim colleagues. In addition to the 3 masajid targeted here in Washington state, we also had a Sikh temple in Federal Way targeted in that same time frame. There have been a concerning spate of attacks across the country targeting Muslim communities. Just today, I learned of masjid in Albuquerque being arsoned as well, with fires being set in a children's playground, no less. A children's playground where your kids would go down the slide and play in the courtyard and in front of the prayer hall. Is anyone even talking about these attacks is the real question. So after getting the video of the attack from the masjid leadership, I went ahead and I tweeted it out, and within just a couple of days, we've gotten over 1 million impressions on that one tweet. Congressman Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib shared the attack on Olympia, the fire video, and countless media outlets are covering the story now. Local media from all over the state, including Olympia, showed up at the rally yesterday, showing this love and solidarity that was outpoured from that local Olympia community. That is how you shift the narrative. This is not the work of just one person, but a team of committed advocates that work for your community 365 days per year. Whether it's our media team building lasting relationships with the media, with rapid response communications, just as in the case of this Olympia attack, or the legal team providing pro bono legal services for our community, or our policy team making sure that there are more just laws passed in our state. CAIR Washington is moving that meter for our community. And it's not all negative. We're moving the meter for our youth by creating opportunities for our younger community members to pursue their passion in areas like law, policy, nonprofit operations, and media. We have team members like Najma, who's our youth and advocacy coordinator. We have Ayub, who you just saw just a few minutes ago, who's our operations assistant. And then you have people like Mariam, who is our media coordinator. They're a testament to our next generation coming up from this community and building their skill set under the CAIR Washington banner. As you can see, our team has grown greatly over the years, and I'm excited to announce that we'll be growing our physical space as well. If Jessica can pull up the new video of our offices. Thank you, Jessica. And so as you can see, amazing growth that we're trying to facilitate here. This is an investment in our community, nothing less. I mean, we've been in the same offices for the past few years. As our team grows, we need to invest in a larger space to make sure that we can facilitate a lot of this growth. We're moving from a 1,300 square foot space to now a 4,300 square foot space in downtown. As you can see, there's spaces for meeting rooms. What I visualize is possibly having, movie screenings there, inshallah, once things get better with the COVID situation, community nights, book talks by authors who are releasing, books for, that are of interest to our community. So there's tons of opportunities that are there, and not to mention our youth work. Our youth advisory committee has a space to now meet in person and, put on programming that they can do as well as our press conferences that we are constantly doing as well. So the future looks positive for CAIR Washington, and I want to leave on that positive note. I'll be here a little later on in the evening to talk about, what we need from you. But today we really need your support in talking about this great work that we do. So I'll kick it back to Sumaya. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you so much, Imran. And thank you, supporters and sponsors, for helping make this happen. I think for those of you who have been supporting CAIR or working for CAIR or volunteering, you've seen this growth happen before your eyes, and it's been really incredible. It's truly inspiring, and it couldn't have happened without you. So that's why our theme tonight is Our Community, Our Strength. And it's that is also the community that we look to for direction for CAIR Washington's work. So over the last 5 months, as the crisis in Afghanistan rose to unprecedented levels, CAIR Washington went all hands on deck. One of the few organizations in the country to support our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan, both here and abroad. Up next is CAIR Washington's Legal and Policy Manager, Brianna Offray, who spearheaded that work, to share highlights and present our Outstanding Community Ally Award.
Thank you so much, Sumaya. Assalamu alaikum. Last April, many of you joined us during Ramadan and heard me speak about the importance of CAIR Washington being able to provide all members of our community with access to high quality and culturally competent immigration services, no matter their ability to pay. These services are crucial because access to family reunification, asylum, and naturalization are essential pillars in achieving justice and equity for Muslims in America, especially here in Washington, where over 1/3 of the Muslim community is either an immigrant, a refugee, or a first-generation American. Thanks to your adoption of this vision and your generous donations, we were able to begin operations on CAIR Washington's Immigrant Rights Center in June. The significance of making this work a priority and our ability to have those services in place quickly became apparent in August, when the US's shamefully executed withdrawal from Afghanistan after its 20-year occupation caused an evacuation and refugee crisis that left our Afghan brothers and sisters desperate for specialized immigration services to help them reach safety and their families here in Washington. During the withdrawal, like Sumaya said, our team worked literally around the clock, and we employed every connection that we had available to directly help facilitate the successful military evacuation of 9 of our local community members. We later discovered that this was more than any of Washington's 12 Senate and congressional offices reported being able to successfully help evacuate. I think this truly speaks to the strength of CAIR Washington's networks, influence, and expertise, and the tenacity of this team. Immediately following the withdrawal, we started working overtime to find a way to help the nearly 2,000 other at-risk Afghans who contacted us for help after being left behind by the US military. In the next weeks, the media and public attention inevitably moved on, but our team never stopped. We had spoken with each of these people directly. We heard from their families, we received photos, we knew their stories, and we knew how much danger they would face if left to the Taliban. CAIR Washington, of course, is not a rescue or a refugee resettlement organization, but we did know that there must be something more that we could do with the tools that we had. From this determination was born the idea of CAIR Washington's Afghanistan Crisis Response Clinic, which is a remote project uniting hundreds of volunteer attorneys from across the nation in a unified effort to help the at-risk Afghans still seeking evacuation to apply for humanitarian parole, and to assist those who were already evacuated without refugee status to apply for special immigrant visas, asylum, and family visas so that they will not be returned to this danger a year from now. Within just 2 weeks of that final evacuation flight, our team, with the help of our partners, including one you'll hear from shortly, was able to organize a training for over 400 attorneys. Now, just 3 months later, we've already trained over 1,000 attorneys to work on this project, and our clinic is well underway. CAIR Washington is leading this work in our state and overseeing the completion of hundreds of simultaneous applications and assisting applicants with the exorbitant government filing fees with the help of funds raised from you, our supporters, over these last few months. CAIR Washington has been able to become a defining leader in this crisis due to our legal team's specialized expertise in humanitarian parole, asylum, and refugee law, our organization's ability to bring cultural and language accessibility, as well as trauma sensitivity to these clients and their families, and our ability as an organization to quickly deploy our resources and engage our partners in organizing systems of support. But in order to sustain this work, we will need significant help from our supporters. While the bulk of the work of our clinic is being done by generous pro bono volunteer attorneys, there are still operational costs required to process and submit these applications and to nominally compensate our roster of highly demanded immigration expert reviewers so that we can continue to count on their assistance and continue processing these high volumes of applications. Together, our community has the opportunity to make an invaluable impact on the lives of these brothers and sisters in need. For just $250, you could sponsor the full operational costs of an entire family's humanitarian parole applications. For $1,000, you can make it possible for us to move another 4 entire families through our humanitarian parole process. To give you an idea of what that really means, taking a look this morning at the next 4 families in our queue today, that makes up 36 individual people that you would be giving a chance to experience the freedom, the safety, education, and civil rights that we are so fortunate to enjoy here. If you'd like to assist evacuated families that have already arrived in Washington and don't have the protection of refugee status, $2,500 will sponsor the costs of an entire family's asylum applications. While such sponsorships are invaluable to our work, truly any amount that you can donate today will help go towards these expenses, as well as the exorbitant government filing fees that might otherwise limit some families from full access to these life-saving applications. I can't emphasize enough how important these donations would be to our community. CAIR Washington cannot do this work without the support of our entire community. So I hope that you will join us in this effort to bring safety and opportunity to our Afghan brothers and sisters. And now I would like to introduce someone who has been an incredible ally to our community and this effort, working behind the scenes to help make much of the work I just described possible. Tamina Watson is a nationally acclaimed immigration attorney and the founder of Watson Immigration Law in Seattle. She's a podcaster, author, blogger, activist, and policy advocate. Tamina is a national spokesperson of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and she serves as the chair of the response committee for the Washington chapter, as well as on many other boards and organizations locally. She is a co-founder of the Washington Immigrant Defense Network, or WIDEN, as well as Airport Lawyer, both of which were crucial tools for creating access to emergency legal aid in response to harmful policies such as family separation and the Muslim and African bans. Tamina's mentorship and her best-selling book, Legal Heroes in the Trump Era, Be Inspired, Make Your Impact, Change the World, have been a great personal inspiration to me that particularly at the beginning of this Afghan evacuation crisis, unlocked the realization that our little team at CAIR Washington had the power to do something significant to help, even from our tiny corner of the world. Since the start of this current crisis in August, Tamina has helped CAIR Washington and other partner organizations train over 1,000 pro bono and immigration attorneys to assist with the emergency legal needs of Afghans. She's helped our team design the model for our Afghanistan Crisis Response Clinic based on her earlier WIDEN model. And she's facilitated many of the partnerships with other nonprofit organizations, bar associations, funding resources, technical developers, and government offices that have allowed us to make this clinic a reality. Thanks in large part to Tamina's passion, dedication, and indomitable persuasive skills, and tremendous care for our community. In just the last month, CAIR Washington's Afghanistan Crisis Response Clinic has already been able to connect nearly 100 at-risk Afghans with pro bono lawyers. I'm so proud today to present Tamina Watson with CAIR Washington's 2021 Outstanding Community Ally Award.
Thank you, Brianna. My goodness, thank you so much for laying it out like that. I think when you do this work, you don't think about it, you just do it. Assalamu alaikum to everybody. I am so honored and grateful for that introduction and for that award, and I'm humbled and grateful for the recognition. In times of crisis, we learn who our leaders are. This is one of those times, and CAIR Washington is one of those leaders. I want to share a summary of what I have witnessed of CAIR Washington, especially since August this year. And I want to share my thoughts on why CAIR Washington is a crucial organization in this moment in Washington state. On August 15th, as we were all coming to realize the enormity of the problem with Kabul falling and Afghan nationals facing life or death situations, I was connected to a few people who needed help. Some were individuals, and one was an organization that was trying to evacuate 100 women out of Kabul. It occurred to me that I must check in with CAIR Washington. And at that time, Brianna told me that by then, CAIR Washington had received over 1,200 calls and was wondering what to do. I knew immediately that we were facing a moment when once again, lawyers would be needed in record numbers. Brianna double-checked to be sure that all pro bono lawyers would be covered by their organization's insurance policy. And once we had that confirmation, we didn't waste a moment. Within weeks, we organized a training and collaborated with a few organizations and trained the 1,000 lawyers that Brianna has mentioned, all from around the country. And in fact, I believe that our training has been actually shared more than we know, and we have probably trained more than 1,000 people. Thank you to each of the organizations that stepped up for that training. The Washington Immigrant Defense Network, a very special shout out and thank you to the board members and to our assistant Cambria Judd Babbitt. Thank you to South Asian Bar Association of North America, with a special shout out to Teja Shah, Tara Raghavan, and Mona Shah. Thank you to PARS Equality Center, and a special shout out to Seema Alizadeh. Thank you to National Asian Pacific American Bar Association, and thank you to the Alliance for International Women's Rights, with a special thank you to Lisa Herb and her team. Immigration lawyers Jay Garrison, Daniel Roche, Margaret Stock, and Seema Alizadeh stepped up to lead the training. A huge thank you to them. But training was just the beginning of the efforts. What we came to learn soon thereafter is that the legal organizations around the state of Washington were inundated with calls for help. Community organizations, community leaders, political leaders, and business leaders all were getting calls to help. We were learning that the numbers were steadily rising every day, and hundreds of people right here in Washington state would need legal assistance. But who would provide that help? The thousands of lawyers that we helped train did not have the specialized expertise and would need supervision. The work of preparing humanitarian parole applications and special immigrant visa petitions are not things that immigration lawyers do all the time. It is a niche expertise. And there were only a few who were competent to do so. Legal organizations around Washington state are already overwhelmed with a regular caseload and had limited capacity and almost no experts. So all eyes kept coming back to CAIR Washington. Yet CAIR Washington, with limited capacity itself, realized it was still in the best position to lead the charge. And lead they did, and they continue to do so. Not only have they trained pro bono attorneys, Brianna, Imran, and their team, as you have heard, they have not slept since August 2021, and I am witness to that. They are creating solutions and strategies. They are to manage thousands of cases. You need resources, not just money. but also an infrastructure. I have witnessed Brianna spend hours at this point drafting, collating, creating, and organizing sample documents so that pro bono attorneys will have these to help the community. During this time, a legal tech company, Lightning Law, and its CEO, Elisa Brodkowitz, stepped up and said, "What do you need?" Elisa and her team have donated over $10,000 worth of technology SINs and have been working closely with Brianna and the team to create a custom database. It needs to be a custom one because it is unprecedented work. This unprecedented situation requires collaborating with hundreds of lawyers on thousands of cases over the next few years, but more money will be needed to build it out. At this point, CAIR Washington is partnering with the Washington chapter of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA. A huge shout out to my colleagues at AILA, Michelle Carney, Joel Paget, Diana Chamberlain, Erin Zipfeld, Gretchen Corbin-Lees, and all the lawyers who are on standby. What is at stake for Washington? Most Afghan community members in Washington state have family members who need immigration assistance to come to the US. Of those who have already evacuated and are here in the United States, Washington state is expecting about 1,700 of them. Those individuals will need continued immigration assistance to complete their own journeys, but they too have family members back home who will need assistance. What is at stake for you? This is a moment for us to hold our Afghan brothers and sisters in our hearts and take action to help. They are our neighbors, and of course, there are across the globe in Afghanistan. The action that we will take will be felt for generations to come. So let's ensure that we do our part in this crisis. And remember, as Imran said, not everything is in the news. Remember that even if you don't hear about this specific need in the news, it is still a crisis. As mentioned before, no other organization has the necessary capacity, bandwidth, and expertise. CAIR Washington is filling that gap, but it can only do so with our help. CAIR Washington has been providing vital help over the last 19 years in Washington state. They have been helping with civil rights, discrimination, Islamophobia, and of course, Imran has set the scene about what kind of work and how profound and impactful it is. And it is so much more than that. And you, all of you here, know this already. And to add on such a huge undertaking as the Afghanistan Response Clinic, it is commendable. But when leaders step up, it is our job to rally around them. Hold them up so they don't fall doing this important work. This is the time that you can come and help to ensure CAIR Washington can continue its leadership. So I ask you to extend your hand to them. Donate generously so that the fundamental needs of the organization are met, so that they can continue to help the bullying at schools, discrimination at work, and all the other challenges, because we are looking to them and they need us more than ever. Thousands of people's lives are depending on it. Thank you so much for recognizing the work that we've done together. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you so much, Thamina and Brianna, for speaking to all the behind the scenes work that went into CAIR Washington's and our partners' responses to this unprecedented crisis. I sort of observed this from the outside as one of the volunteer attorneys, and to see this clinic come up seemingly out of nowhere based solely on the needs that the team saw in front of them. It is truly inspiring, and it's really incredible what we've been able to accomplish. And inshallah, we will be blessed to help as many Afghans as needed. And we pray that the situation continues to improve. Although it may seem dire at times, the work of folks like Thamina and Brianna and our team at CAIR and our partners that we're going to honor tonight, they they show us that in these times when everything seems so dark, that's when the best of us can come out. And so I think that's a true testament to that, and appreciate you so much for sharing that with us and being our partner in that work. And now on to our keynote. Imam Khalid Latif is the university chaplain for New York University and the executive director of the Islamic Center at NYU. He's worked tirelessly to foster interfaith dialogue and in community service, and has won too many awards for me to list here. Among other ventures, he has co-founded Pillars of Peace, a nonprofit and soon-to-be shelter for survivors of domestic violence. Imam Latif is a sought-after speaker and commentator, and has engaged with audiences all over the world. He's shared stages with the likes of Pope Francis and the Dalai Lama, and he's sharing the stage with us tonight. So thank you so much for joining us. Please welcome all the way from New York, Imam Khalid Latif.
Thank you so much for having me and for that kind introduction. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah, bismillah, walhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We thank him, we praise him, we glorify him. Beseech him to send his choicest salutations upon his most beloved sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, and upon all those who choose to tread in his path until the last day. You know, one of the things that struck me when Imran was speaking before around the horrific tragedies that these masjids in Seattle, Washington have been experiencing in the communities subsequently, is that nobody is talking about these things. And I think fundamentally within this experience is a need to recognize that nobody is going to build for us what we have to build for ourselves. The reality that our community experiences as a religious minority made up of minorities in and of itself is something that builds off of the narrative experience reality of minorities within this country's history since its onset. And fundamentally, the systems and structures that are in place are not built for the provision and protection of those that are underserved and underprivileged, but more so are built out to ensure that the power dynamic is harnessed within the grasp of those who take on a more privileged mode of existence. I work at New York University as the university's chaplain. I started working at NYU in 2005. In 2006, though, for a brief moment, I worked at Princeton University. Brief, it was an entire year, but I was about 24 years of age at that time. And in my first week at Princeton University, I was meeting luminary individuals of all kinds of backgrounds. One of the first people I met was actually Cornel West, who you're going to be speaking with or hearing from next week at part 2 of this amazing endeavor to support CAIR Washington and all of its good work. I met Toni Morrison, who since passed away. I met someone who is responsible for the resurgence of China's economy and others who played a role at that time in the founding of organizations like Amazon.com. And in that first week, I spent a lot of time thinking, what am I doing here? How do I really fit into everything that's around me? And then my second week at Princeton University, I started to get letters from alumni of the university that said, we don't want Muslims here at Princeton. We don't want your Sharia law in this place. Someone like you should never be in a place like this. One guy even sent me a 400-page book that he wrote saying, read this, it'll explain to you why someone like you should never be in a place like this. And I went to my supervisors, the heads of religious life at Princeton University. I said, what am I supposed to do in response to this? Their explanation to me was that these individuals were upset because they assumed I was hired for a different role. That simultaneous to my onboarding, the head of religious life, a really great man by the name of Tom Brightenthal, who was moving on to become the Archbishop of Southern Ohio, his role was being vacated, and their assumption was that I had been hired to take on his position. And they said, this is why they're upset. I said, that's not any better. It's actually a lot worse. Why couldn't I be the dean of the chapel just because I'm Muslim? One of the things that happens at Princeton University every year at the end of the academic calendar around graduation time is that they have a parade of alumni from the oldest from way back when coming and marching with those from the more recent years in a display of Princeton pride. And you have people wearing white suits with orange pinstripes, a lot of pomp and circumstance. And the way the parade is structured is that the eldest alums, they take up the front lines. And then you have year after year after year, and at the rear of the procession are the more recent alums. And what you see is decades and decades of class years that are all essentially white males. You at some point see a little bit of diversity in terms of race and ethnicity. Some women, but pretty much by the end of it, it's still mostly white men. At the end of that year, I was invited to participate in an unofficial graduation ceremony that takes place on most college campuses throughout the United States, called a Pan-African Baccalaureate. A celebration of Black and brown students, of those mostly Black and of those mostly African American, who are celebrating their graduation amongst their friends, peers, and families in this unofficial ceremony. And I was asked to speak at it and participate in it. There was a young woman who I was blessed to share the dais with, who is the valedictorian of that ceremony. And she said to all those who were in attendance that just because we are at Princeton does not mean that we are of Princeton. And we should never forget the struggles that so many had to endure and go through in order for us to be where we are today. So the harnessing of our degrees and credentials, the building out of relationships and networks at this space, everything that we have taken from it should never be for our own individual advancement, but always in pursuit of the common good and what pushes the community ahead. There's so much that we can draw from that young woman's illuminating remarks. But what I want you to understand primarily is that most every institution that we have that surrounds us was not built for those who come from minority backgrounds. And if you can check off any box of privilege, a system and a structure, it's going to tell your story. But our stories, they're not going to necessarily be told in the same way. The manner and mode in which we engage has to be in a prism of reality. And just as this young woman gave voices of empowerment, and we can draw from deep examples of the beautiful work that CAIR Washington does to ensure that our community feels protected, feels safe, has our rights fulfilled. And we never have to compromise, especially on behalf of those who only accept us for what we are when we become that which we are not. But we can take pride in our sense of identity and to move forward in a sense that says that our institutions need to be strengthened in order to break down what is systemic and structural. And I say this to you as somebody who you heard a little bit about me in that kind introduction that was done on my behalf, but as somebody who has shared stages with people like the Pope, somebody who has done similar events with people like the Dalai Lama. I can still tell you in deep detail what it's like to be surveilled, profiled, detained. 2010 was quite an interesting year for me. And at one point in my career, I served as a department chaplain for the New York City Police Department. And that also happened at the tail end of 2007. So I've been in that role at this time for 2.5 years, in addition to my work at New York University. In 2010, the White House reached out to us at our Islamic Center at NYU, wanting to do a program in conjunction with us that featured then John Brennan, the head of intelligence for President Obama. And I'd been invited over the Obama administration's tenure a few times to meet with his senior staff, Valerie Jarrett and others, as well as President Obama himself. And John Brennan, when he came to our Islamic Center in 2010, we had a meeting with different Muslim leaders from the United States. Dr. Sherman Jackson was there, Dr. Ingrid Mattson was there, so many others were there. And then there was a bigger public lecture that probably had 400 or 500 people at it. And John Brennan, when he got on the stage, amongst his remarks, he addressed me and he said, Imam Latif, the president, he thinks of you as a great American citizen, et cetera, et cetera. He referenced a letter that I had written to President Obama that had been published in a magazine around that time. And he went on to give a few different praises from the president himself. About 2 weeks later was the first time the FBI knocked on my apartment door. And I was asleep in my room, and at that time I wasn't married, and a friend of mine was staying over, and he came to my bedroom and he said, the FBI is at the front door. I got up in a daze and I sat with them in my living room, but prior to, I reached out to New York University's senior administration, who are remarkable in terms of their solidarity with us as a Muslim community. And I said to them, I live in a New York University building, that the FBI is in my home. While I sat now with these 2 FBI agents in my living room, an NYU public safety officer came to the door and said, you have no right to be here. You need to leave right now. The next day, when I left from my apartment building and walked towards my car to start heading towards my office, those same 2 agents were now leaning on my car. They said, let's go to the federal building. And I said, there's no way I'm going with you to any type of federal building. And they kept pursuing and they kept pursuing. And I simply said no. And I got in my car and they followed me all the way to my office and sat down in front of my desk with me. And after speaking to me for some extended period of time, it was clear that the conversation had moved from something that the day prior was in a stage of just fishing to now more specificity about who I am and what it is that I do. And I said to them, what is it that you really want from me? And they said, you're just too good to be true. Know that we're watching you. The idea of being suspect before being presumed of anything of innocence was something that I was now experiencing at its deepest of levels. I was in my 20s at this time. I didn't know who to talk to or where to turn. The solace that I found in being able to have done some type of work with different individuals was still now coupled with a psychological shackling that stems from living in a supremacist society. Because of it and its consequences are that the thoughts that we think are not necessarily our own thoughts, but as minorities, it's not a physical shackling alone, but a mental shackling that gets you to think the thoughts that they want you to think. I became afraid to drive to see my parents. I didn't know who was listening when I was on a phone call. Turning around over my shoulder again and again to see who might be following me. And a paralysis that had a very chilling effect that's part of the system and what it seeks to do. And over the course of however many years since then, being visited again and again and going through realities of detainment and surveillance and being profiled. And this is happening to somebody like me, who has met with people in levels of government from local, city, state, federal, people who are global leaders. What do you think is happening to people who don't have those connections? What do you think is happening to people who don't have those relationships? At the end of 2010, I went through an experience while I was in my capacity as a chaplain for the NYPD. It was the 9th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. And one of the things that we would do as police chaplains is attend the 9/11 memorial service on September 11th. By rank, I was an inspector, a fairly high rank, one rank below a one-star chief. And this very military-esque institution, it came with a lot of clout. And what we would do on the 9/11 attacks memorial service was start by having breakfast with family members who lost loved ones on that day at police headquarters. We'd go down to the memorial site and then participate in the ceremony. And on the 9th anniversary of the attacks, Vice President Biden was there, or then Vice President, our current president. The ceremony was a little bit more closed off. The current memorial structure was still being built. And so they had a stage where everyone spoke from who was speaking. In front of them was a VIP area for city officials, family members, celebrities, other New York City leaders. Behind us was a press pit for the media to come and document. And behind them was an area for the public to come and participate. And I'm standing now, I have my beard, I have my head covered, but I'm wearing this uniform. I'm talking to people, we're waiting for things to get started. 3 men approach me wearing suits. And they say, Secret Service has spotted you from the top of a building. They want us to check your credentials just in case. And I said, just in case what? And they said, we're sorry that we're doing this to you. I said, then why are you doing it? And to understand what they're questioning in that moment is not merely the validity of my physical presence at that space, but the entire validity of my emotions attached to it and everything that it is built upon. I was an undergrad at New York University on September 11th in 2001. I stood with about 12,000 of my classmates in the middle of our campus in a park called Washington Square as we watched the second plane fly into the towers. As young Muslims, we were arguably the closest Muslim community to the Ground Zero site at that time. We had media from all over the world putting microphones in our faces, wanting to know, what do Muslims think about all of this? I had to deal with backlash against me personally, as well as many people that I know. The very day of the attacks, a young woman tried to push me down a staircase. I stood at funerals for people of my faith and other walks of life who died on that day. And so much of what I do today is informed, not necessarily by my own will, but because of a narrative imposed upon me by the atrocities of that day. And in that moment, those men are questioning the validity of all of it. And the frustrating thing isn't that I'm going through it, but the frustrating thing is, well, what can I really do about it? That if I was to say anything in response, it would just make the situation that much worse. And where I could not speak, and there was hundreds of people standing around us, and they just said nothing. There was a mother standing next to me who lost her son on September 11th that said to those men that what you are doing right now is more dishonoring to the memory of our loved ones that we lost on that day than anything else. That here this young man is standing with us in our moment of need, and you're making it seem as if he's doing something wrong just because he's Muslim. And as easily as they had taken the validation away, she brought it back. Now, I want you to think about this from a few different frames. One, somebody sitting somewhere concocted a policy that said, if you see somebody that looks like this, look at them again. I'm in a police uniform, man. Not that I'm necessarily proud about that. But even if I wasn't, it still wouldn't be okay. And the realities that numerous minority populations face within this country, to me, is just a building and symptomatic of a deeply entrenched anti-Blackness that the country itself is built upon. That you have individuals who are seated right now in discussions, making decisions about populations in their entirety without any representative voice sitting at the table of those minority demographics, being able to speak on their own behalf. People are sitting with their stereotypes. People are sitting with their racisms. People are sitting with their bigotry. You see it every single day. It's undeniable. We live in a space where the determining factors of who has and who has not are rooted in fundamentally elements of race and class. And these policies are indicative of this understanding. Our country was not built in the same way from the European context from which people left in order to come here, so to speak. And where you had those who were living in a European sphere that had launched transatlantic slave trades and crusades in the names of religion, and then embraced liberalism as a way to be an antidote for all of the mess that they had created. Those who came to this country sought to establish in their own claim some type of pursuit of diversity. But their worst battles were not fought in the name of any religious or spiritual tradition. This country's most ugly and deadliest battles, its civil war, were fought on principles of race. Literally, its foundational documents afford full privilege to white men. Women are given nothing, and Black men and women aren't even considered to be a whole person in comparison to their white counterparts. And you see the same thing happening again and again and again. And that policy engagement necessitates us having strong institutions like CAIR Washington to amplify our voices. So it's not that nobody is telling our stories or nobody is speaking on behalf of us, but we increase the amplification of the microphones by putting in the resources, supporting our best and most talented individuals to get done what nobody else is going to do for us in the ways that we can do. Second, I want you to think about this in the prism of, if I had to go through it again, then I would continue to go through it. For certain battles to be won, those battles have to take place in the first place. You might be the only one that is speaking when everyone else is silent. You might be the only one that is standing when everyone else is seated. But in order for us to break this good-bad framework, we need individuals to stand up on principles, ethics, values that now find themselves within our own developed processes and systems to take on what it is that is holding down so many. Organized evil will always triumph over disorganized righteousness. This is truth, and we have to be able to accept it. But for us to be able to break things down, sometimes we have to stand in the face of what it is that is oppressive to do what it is that needs to be done. And most importantly, when you think about what a good person is, I want you to think about that mother who stood next to me on that day, who in the midst of a sea of people who had opportunity to do what was right and do what she did, something within her still compelled her to do it. She saw someone underserved and underprivileged, recognized that, and leveraged her own power and privilege to be a mode of rectification. Because who in their right mind is going to say something to a mother who lost her son on September 11th while she's standing at the ground zero site on September 11th itself? Nobody. And she knew that. And she did it just because it was the right thing to do. That's what pluralism is. That's what solidarity and real love is. There's no need for performative allyship anymore. We don't have to go chase after people who give us what it is that we were entitled to in the first place. When we have amazing individuals like the team at CAIR Washington, people who are motivated to just be people of good consciousness, these are the type of people we want to get behind. And so tonight, when you are here, you pick up one of these and you send a message to everybody in your phone saying that we have an opportunity to right what is wrong in this country. We're going to get behind people who are good people, not ambiguously good or relatively good, but they are good people who are doing good things. And give whatever it is that you can to support their good work as well. Next week, there's a part 2 to this. And I can tell you undoubtedly, Dr. Cornel West is going to blow our minds in terms of the message that he's going to share. So where you're here tonight, make sure you're here then as well, and bring another 10 or 20 people with you. It's all online. There's enough space for everybody. But my prayer is that God Almighty, Allah Azza wa Jal, continues to strengthen our brothers and sisters at CAIR Washington. He makes them a means of benefit, a means of healing, a means of light for all of his creation. He makes us the best of their supporters, and that he guides and blesses us all. Wallahu ta'ala alim wa billahi tawfiq. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much, Imam Khalid. That was so inspiring. And what a beautiful story to end on from your comments. Next up is Imran Siddiqui again, our executive director.
Assalamu alaikum. How am I supposed to follow that up? That's just after following Brianna, Tahmina, and Imam Khalid, I don't have a lot to bring to the table, but I'm here to try and do as much as I can to raise awareness to this cause. I mean, Imam Khalid laid this out so beautifully, and you know what we're dealing with here. I outlined this in my earlier talk in terms of the challenges that exist in society, you know, in terms of these mosque vandalisms, this increase in rhetoric. I remember back just a few years ago, as the Trump era started, we had one of the largest mosque protests, armed mosque protests in front of one of our mosques in Phoenix, Arizona. And it was just an ugly, ugly situation. And a few years later, as I was the executive director of CAIR, we had armed, you know, anti-Muslim bigots coming into our office trying to confront us with guns at some point. So, and what Imam Khalid was trying to lay out is that this is not about who's in office during a given time. He experienced this form of bigotry while you had, you know, the Obama administration going on. We're seeing this upswing in mosque attacks happening while the Biden administration is going on. So it has nothing to do with who is in office. Yes, you know, you see hate amplified at a very large platform when somebody like Trump is in office, but this hasn't gone anywhere after Trump left office. It's still very much here, and it's very much in our state of Washington, as evidenced by this upswing in attacks. How can you help CAIR Washington? I want everybody to take out their phones right now, and hopefully you all can see this maybe, but I don't think it's showing up with my background. But if you text 44321 and you text the word CAIRWA, CAIRWA, to this number 44321, it'll take you to our donation page, just to talk a little bit about what our goal is for the end of the year. As I said earlier in the program, we usually have an in-person banquet. We have like the high-level fundraiser who's, you know, like going around. We have 600 people in a room from the community to talk about these things. I'm not going to do that today. We don't have the time to do that today, and I don't have the stress level within me to handle doing a fundraiser like this. But I do want to tell you about the ways in which you can give. You can do it from your phone right now as we speak. If you have Apple Pay, you can just press a button and do that Apple Pay once you go to that page by texting 44321. Text the word CAIR Watch to that number. If you have GPay, it's as easy as that as well. One click and you can make a donation. You can go to our website, cairwa.org, and donate there. I see a couple of donations tonight. I see $1,000 donation there. I see a $2,000 donation there as well. So Jazakallah khair for those who have donated so far. As you can see, we've raised about $45,000 of our $200,000 year-end goal. And this is just to continue CAIR Washington's work over the course of the year. We're not having like that big banquet where everybody's coming in. It's going to take different ways. We've hit you up through mail. We've hit you up through email. So I know this is it's difficult during these times and people are zoomed out. So we're not having 600 people on a Zoom call per se. But let's say you have an employee matching program. I know a lot of folks here in Washington State work at Microsoft and some of these other major corporations, Amazon, Intel, so many others. We're set up in Benevity where you can actually do that employee matching. So it helps us doubly. If you donate through your employee giving program, we get double the donation through that program. So definitely consider doing that. That's one way. We also take stock donations as well. So I know it's getting towards the end of that fiscal year in 2021, tax considerations, you want that last tax deduction of the year. There's no better way to make that tax deduction than to support the growth of your local civil rights organization during this time when there's this massive uptick in hate. And when you see our legal team and our policy teams and our communications team doing this amazing work around the clock, you know that this is going to a good place, and you know that this is going to have a return on investment for years to come. We're past that point where we're just this little upstart organization, and Jazakallah khair for everybody who's put in the time and effort to building this amazing institution in the previous years. But now we're getting to a different phase of our life cycle. We have to build a sustaining institution that's going to grow for years to come. So you can do it through your phone, you can do it through our website, you can do those stock donations. And so just tell your friends, tell everybody who, let's say you can't give right now, you can mail us a check, you can do whatever, but text your friends, let them know that CAIR Washington is doing such amazing work for the community. We still have, we want to recognize some amazing folks that are doing great work in this community, as well as highlight our youth. You're going to hear from one of our youth advisory committee right now, mashallah. We have amazing youth in this Washington State community that are going to be speaking on our behalf as well and taking that work forward. So we'll hear about that in just a minute. I also wanted just to recognize a great partner here, Amana Mutual Funds. We do our great 401ks through there as a organization. If you want to, get involved in halal investments, Amana does great work. So if Jess can load up that video right now, we can highlight their work as well. Jazakallah khair to our brothers and sisters at Amana for sponsoring this event.
For more than 30 years, Amana Mutual Funds have provided halal investment vehicles serving the unique needs of the Muslim community. Discover how you can align your investments with your principles in a retirement, health, or education savings account, or invest for Hajj. To obtain this and other important information in a prospectus or summary prospectus, please visit amanafunds.com or call toll-free 1-888-732-6262. Please read the prospectus and consider an investment's objectives, risks, charges, and expenses carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. The Amana funds limit the securities they purchase to those consistent with Islamic principles. This limits opportunities and may affect performance.
Thank you, Amana Mutual Funds, and to all our sponsors for tonight. As Imran said, we do have one of our Youth Advisory Committee members coming up next to present an award. So our youth, we're so proud of our youth. They are our there are leaders today and are leaders of the future. Abdul Muhsin is a junior at Sammamish High School and enrolled in Running Start at Bellevue College. He is passionate about bringing affordable healthcare to low-income communities, has volunteered throughout the Puget Sound, and is working toward a career in medicine. Abdul will present our award for outstanding community service.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Abdul Mohsin, and I'm a part of CAIR Washington's Youth Advocacy Committee, which is truly a highlight of CAIR Washington's path to empowering youth in Washington State. Over the past few years, members of the Youth Advocacy Committee have organized countless events, such as the Youth Career Night, the Youth Roundtable discussions, just to name a few. I'm super excited to be a part of the CAIR Washington Youth Advocacy Committee, and I hope to create even more positive change in the communities around me with the help of the amazing co-members of the committee and the leaders of CAIR Washington. So today, I'm honored to present Naveed Hamidi, the Executive Director at Afghan Health Initiative, our Outstanding Community Service Award for the work the Afghan Health Initiative has done to help new Afghan refugees arriving in Washington State.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much, brother, and Jazakallah khair for this. Thank you so much, CAIR Washington. This means a lot to us as a community, and we're honored for the recognition. As the only led Afghan organization this means a lot to our community. I don't know, there were some technical difficulties. Thanks so much, guys, and thank you, CAIR Washington. As I was saying before, as the only Afghan-led organization serving thousands of Afghans, new and old, and specifically in past a few months, the situation that changed in Afghanistan, there was so much pressure in our community finding help and trying to find legal help. And majority of our community members, they're very new to the community, and we as organizations trying to be a bridge between the systems and the services that are existing in our community. And a lot of our community members, because of lack of English and they're new to the systems, they're not able to navigate those systems. So for us as an organization, when that regime changed in Afghanistan, all our community members wanted to find help to help their families in Afghanistan to do something good, to make sure that they're safe and sound, and find legal options to get them out of the country. And the only organizations that, to be honest, was coming to mind as a Muslim, as an Afghan immigrant myself, was CAIR Washington's and the good work that they're doing to our Muslim community. And we referred so many of our community members to CAIR Washington's for help and legal help and advice and a lot of other stuff. And they always help us generously. So we're grateful, and Jazakallah khair, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brother Naveed. And I want to give a shout out to all the staff and volunteers who have worked at CAIR Washington, in addition to the supporters and sponsors, those of you who have donated tonight or donated all this year or in the past. And then in particular for the staff and volunteers who, and our partners who are carrying the weight of this work. It's not easy to be working, having sleepless nights, to have the weight of the community on your shoulders, to be trying to find solutions amidst crises that folks outside of your control are creating, and that's heavy work, and we believe it's sacred work. So my shout outs to all of the workers, the staff and volunteers at CAIR Washington, and the folks listening in who support in so many ways, whether it is by volunteering or promoting our work, lifting up an action, writing a letter, a sign-on, and on to donating whatever you can. This is a community. It takes all of us. We wouldn't be here without you. So thank you so much. As we've said, this is just part one. So please join us next week for part two on December 11th at 2:30 to 4. We'll have Dr. Cornell West. We are excited to see that. So thank you again. Don't forget to donate if you haven't already, and see you next week. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, I almost forgot. We have one more sponsor video to share. So we're going to pull that up right now.
When you witness the suffering of another, you can only do one of two things. You can either look away, or you can lend a helping hand. When we work together to address the needs of others, we don't just provide relief, but we empower the society to stand back up on its feet, because what people really want is not your charity, but opportunity to grow and thrive and improve the world they live in. Our dollars can change history, change the destinies of generations. Find out how at hhrd.org.
Thank you again to all of our sponsors and to all of you for listening. And again, see you next week with Dr. Cornell West. Assalamu alaikum.